5 minutes.
Secretary Austin, last week, General McKenzie repeated that he has many regrets about the botched, deadly, and embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that he supports investigations into that withdrawal. A moment ago, you said you executed the president's order. You didn't tell us what you advised the president to do. But do you have regrets about the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
I support the president's decision.
Do you have regrets about the withdrawal or how the withdrawal occurred from Afghanistan that cost the lives of 13 of our service members?
I don't have any regrets.
You don't have any regrets. Secretary Austin, it's very telling. Secretary Austin, has there ever been any accountability for anyone within the Department of Defense for the deadly, botched, and embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan? Any accountability?
Hey, listen, our troops evacuated 124,000 people off of that airfield.
Has anyone been held accountable? If a Navy captain grounded a ship, what happens immediately?
Typically, that captain is removed.
That captain is removed. Has anyone been held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan?
To my knowledge, no.
You don't regret it? No one's ever been held accountable? Mr. Chairman, this is why this Republican majority must provide the accountability that this administration wants to sweep under the rug with what happened in Afghanistan. General Milley,
to be clear, I don't.
General Milley,
the great
General Milley, a few weeks ago, Northcom Commander Van Herk sat before us and testified about the situation at the southern border. You commented a little bit ago. You agree there's a crisis at the southern border. It's a national security threat to this country. Every 7.5 minutes, an American dies from fentanyl poisoning because of the drugs that are flowing over the southern border. And since we've been in this hearing, that means 20 Americans have died of fentanyl poisoning. 99% of it comes over the southern border. General Van Herk told us that President Biden has never requested a single hearing from him, the Northcom commander, about the southern border. Has the president ever asked you for a briefing about the southern border and the national security threats?
I have been in several meetings and briefings, principals committees and other forums, specifically about the southern border. And there's no question.
With the president?
A couple of them were with Vice President and some discussions with the President. That's correct. Now, if I could, look at the southern border situation is a very serious situation, and you know it as well as I do, and that there's some, I think it's in the range, the reports I get is about 5,000 a day. You're talking about 35,000 people a week. That's an Army Corps that come across that border. And then with the fentanyl issue that you're talking about, look at, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but the ranges that have been reported to me is something where between 70 and 100,000. That's an enormous amount of casualties and people dying, young kids that are dying in our communities. So there is a crisis at that border. Now, the question is, what do you do about it? And we have to work much closer, I think anyway, with Mexico. There's certain things that have to be done along the border with the CPB and others. Now, that's out of our lane. That's DHS, et cetera.
I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to ask you this. So General Van Herk told me, he said, quote, President Biden could ask under special authorities for the military to do more. That's what he told us before this committee. What special authorities is he talking about?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check back with General Van Herk about the
exact. If there are special authorities, yeah. It's well, there's mind-blowing to me that the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, wouldn't use the military to secure our southern border if it is a crisis and a national security threat that you've agreed with us that it is today.
Yeah, if I could, I personally think the lead should be on the border itself, clearly law enforcement, as opposed to the military. Now, mechanically, could you line up divisions of troops? Of course you could. But is that the right thing to do? Is that the right way to do it? And I would certainly advise against that. We'll execute whatever decisions are made. But lining up...
You would advise against the military doing more at the southern border?
No, what I said was lining up troops and like securing the southern border with divisions of troops. Now, we are supporting the southern border with several thousand troops and logistic support. And I think the lead agency along the border itself should be the police. Now, this.
Sir, I don't want to cut you off. I got to move on. Okay, but if General Van Herk said there are special authorities the president's not using to secure the border,
I'll find out.
We should be digging into that and doing everything that we can. Secretary Austin,
yep.
Last year in your budget request, you asked for $114.7 million for diversity and inclusion activities. This year, you asked for $27 million more. Does that mean that what you did last year didn't work, and that's why you need $27 million more? And how much is it going to take if you're already failing at your objectives with DEI? How much more are you going to need to succeed at it?
I just highlight, sir, that As you know, we are directed by Congress as a result of the 2020.
Gentleman's time has expired.
I
want to inform the witnesses and the members that to make sure everybody knows I'm being fair, I have been allowing members of the panel to finish their answers at the 5-minute point. I'm going to cease to do that. 5 minutes is 5 minutes to make sure that people understand that we treat everybody the same, no matter which side of the aisle they sit on. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Secretary Austin, you were just asked a question with respect to Afghanistan, and you were not given the opportunity to complete your answer. If you would like to, I'd like to give you that opportunity to complete your answer right now. Is there anything else you'd like to say on the subject, sir?
Only to say that I remain very proud of the tremendous work and the sacrifices that our troops made and throughout our efforts in Afghanistan, but especially at the end as they worked hard to evacuate over 124,000 people from there. And work continues to ensure that the people that have helped us in Afghanistan, and if they want to repatriate to the United States or someplace else, we can help them. So.
As someone who served in Afghanistan, I appreciate your remarks, sir. Chairman Milley, with respect to Bakhmut, which you mentioned earlier, it appears that Russia is still unable to accomplish core strategic objectives. It is frankly remarkable to me that Bakhmut still stands and is still owned by the Ukrainians. Do you share the perspective that the failure of Russia after going all out to capture this town is indicative of the fact that we're still facing, that the Ukrainians rather are still facing the same deeply incompetent military that they were facing last year? Or is this a special brand of incompetence that we're seeing with respect to this particular military effort?
I think the Russians are struggling in a big way with command and control, logistics, sustainment, basic tactical doctrine, but also training. These forces are very undertrained. They're essentially doing frontal assaults into machine gun positions, et cetera, and they're getting slaughtered. The Russian troops are. The Ukrainians are doing a very effective area defense that has proven to be very costly to the Russians. For about the last 20, 21 days, the Russians have not made any progress whatsoever in and around Bakhmut. So it's a slaughter fest for the Russians. They're getting hammered in the vicinity of Bakhmut, and the Ukrainians have fought very, very well. That's also true across the entire front-line trace, from Crimea all the way down to Kherson. The Ukrainians have fought a remarkable defensive fight, and the Russians have not achieved their strategic objectives.
Do you see the Russian objectives with respect to Bakhmut as being part of their offensive, or would you say this is a special effort and the broader offensive has yet to begin?
No, I think it's the latter. I think I think the Russian offensive, if you will, began some time ago, and it has had fits and starts, and it has not achieved the momentum and success that they expected it to achieve.
If I could ask you a broader question, which you may not be able to answer. If we had never supported the Ukrainians at all, would Russia have conquered Ukraine by now?
I think without Western support, first of all, I think the Ukrainian people, their will is indomitable. These are the same people, they're the sons and grandsons of the folks who fought Stalin and Zhukov for 10 years from 1945 to 1955. So the Ukrainians are not going to be easily conquered no matter what. If they're fighting with pitchforks and spears, they're going to fight back. But having said that, they would have probably lost considerably more ground without Western assistance. There's no question in my mind about that. So I think Western assistance has been critical to the Ukrainians being able to defend themselves.
With respect to Putin, seems to me, seems to a lot of folks, very clear that he's a war criminal, lots of evidence for this, and yet there are plenty of people in this country who still don't see it that way, who see Putin as basically a national leader pursuing national interests. If you could speak to those folks and give us your sense on his status as a war criminal, that would be appreciated.
I think the war itself is illegal. It undermines the one of the first principles that were established after World War II that underwrites the so-called rules-based international order that is part of the United Nations, for example, which is wars of aggression, which are unprovoked, not in the cause of defense, where large countries then use their military force to attack smaller countries, not in the defense of their own nation. And Ukraine presented no military threat whatsoever to Russia, and yet he lined up 170, 100, or 200,000 troops, multiple divisions, multiple axes of advance, and he conducted a major league war of aggression. A war of aggression in and of itself is a war crime. And then, of course, you've got the actual war crimes in many of the cities and towns. When you bomb and shell civilian cities, when you bomb and shell civilian infrastructure, when you're killing kids and women and children, all of that All of that is war crimes, and their units, their unit commanders, all the way up the chain are committing war crimes. The Russian forces are. And it's a tragic unfolding of events, but it's true. There's a lot of war crimes being committed by the Russian forces in Ukraine.
Thank you. I yield back.